Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Thank you for listening to Your Working Life, my podcast series featuring thought leaders in the career and personal growth arena. You spend a significant portion of your life at work, so my goal is to provide you with tools, inspiration, and resources so you can enjoy your career and love your life. And I am delighted to welcome my special guest to the show today, Leo Bottary. Leo, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Caroline. Thanks for having me this morning.
Oh, I'm so excited that you're with me, and I want to talk about your wonderful new book, The Power of Peers, how the company you keep drives leadership, growth, and success. So let's get started right away. What prompted you to write this book, Leo?
Well, when we looked at all of the books out there, there are thousands of books about leadership. There are hundreds about followership, and very few, at least in the business and education space, about the people who stand beside us. And who you surround yourself with matters. And especially for CEOs and small business owners, and really executives at any level who can often feel quite isolated. We wanted to talk about the value of people around us and the fact that we can get help from others that we just can't find anywhere else.
Well put. And I want to add that you are a vice president at Peer Advantage for Vistage Worldwide, and you direct a thought leadership initiative on the power of peer influence for business leaders. So this is your sweet spot. This is certainly an area of expertise, and I know you're also an adjunct professor for Seton Hall University and their Master of Arts in Strategic Communication and Leadership program. So how can you define peer advantage so it gives our listeners a baseline?
Well, if we think about peer influence, right, we have experienced it our entire lives. Our parents cared about who we hung around with as kids.
Yeah.
By and large, we've had people who we have modeled to our benefit. We have people that maybe have led us astray a time or two. Maybe people around us who hold us, back a bit. But the peer influence is all around us, and we talk a lot about it in the book in terms of not only the peer influence that we recognize, but even the manner in which we're influenced by our peers that we don't recognize always. So the idea, I think, is that imagine this all happens all the time without our giving it a second thought. Imagine if we gave it a second thought. And the difference between peer influence that we experience every day and peer advantage is really being more selective, more strategic, and more structured about how you engage your peers and what would happen if you did that. And the good news is that we don't have to guess. We know that people have been doing it for a long time. So we studied not only Vistage groups, but CEO peer advisory groups and key executive advisory groups here in the U.S. and around the world to see how everyone really benefits when they just engage their peers and they do so in that way. So it is that difference. Peer advantage is a group experience, and it's one where you are more selective, strategic, and structured.
So you talk in the book about how there are still some CEOs and other leaders in global organizations that struggle with isolation. So clearly, this is the opposite end of that spectrum and a positive solution. Can you talk me through that?
Sure. Well, Stanford did a study. Stanford Graduate School of Business did a study back in 2013 that said roughly 2/3 of CEOs aren't really seeking outside leadership advice. And I think in many respects, we kind of grow up thinking that, we can handle it, or we should be able to do it ourselves, or, that we just don't tend to reach out because it can be a sign of weakness in some respects, that I need help. And the reality is that, it's a real sign of strength when you understand how to take all of the assets, all of the resources around you, and really use them not only to your benefit, but whenever you participate and work with your peers, you're helping them as well. And so there's a lot of reciprocity involved, certainly. And if we can engage our peers and think about the fact that we don't have to go it alone, that we can benefit greatly from that.
And Leo, I'm so glad that you're giving millions of listeners who are attentively listening to you on this podcast, permission to ask for help. And you and I both know that successful leaders ask for help, and there is a team, right? There is that peer input. And you're right, that we need to dispel the myth that you need to go it alone. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a great sign of strength.
It really is. And part of it, as you well know from having looked at the book, we talk about the 5 factors that really make peer advantage possible. 1 is surrounding yourself with the right people. 2 is doing so in an environment where you feel safe to be vulnerable, where you know that what happens in the meeting stays in that meeting, so that you feel space. You understand that it's confidential, and that's very, very important. We talk about smart guides, and what we really mean by smart guides are people who lead that meeting, whether it's a professional facilitator or a member that may be doing so on a rotating basis. The responsibilities in many respects are the same, and they are really to just be that guiding hand and try to bring the group together in a way that maximizes, all of the talents of the people and input of the people in the room. 4th, we talk about fostering a valuable interaction, and this is really where you have a process for either meeting tough challenges or identifying promising opportunities. You can give people all the emotional safety in the world, but unless they feel intellectually that there's a process for actually getting things done in a way where they're going to really get some benefit from it, you're not really going to be anywhere. But finally, the 5th factor, which many people who either lead or are parts of these groups find most powerful, is accountability.
Yeah.
The fact that people hold one another accountable, and not in a way that people aren't holding their feet to the fire. I mean, it would be just like if I'm in a meeting and I say, Caroline, here's what I want to do in the next 30 days. Then 30 days later, you're going to ask me about that, not because you're trying to, get me. You care about my success. Yeah, exactly. You want to know, hey, how did that work out for you? Tell me what happened there.
Yeah.
And so, members tend to talk about those things, and they create a culture of accountability that's very, very powerful. And I think in addition to all of the insights that they receive from the people, month in, month out, in between meetings and all that, most importantly, I think also, is that these groups give you the courage to act. You feel like you've vetted an issue, you've got support, you've got people, smart people who you feel like, wow, now I feel confident that I can move forward and should move forward in the way that, I talked about.
So, Leo, let me share, as an executive coach and a career development coach, I work with a lot of leaders, and we've created some group mastermind sessions where fellow leaders in different industries and different organizations come together for a call. And it's a great way for them to check in. And even though they don't really know each other deeply, they have a safe space where they can talk about issues and problems and successes. And I truly appreciate that concept of an accountability master, right? Someone else who can have your back and help you achieve those goals. So my question is, for those leaders out there seeking peers, how do they get started?
Well, it's a really good question. I think it's a matter of just really going out and talking to people, because in part, sometimes we have to also figure out, what do we want from a group?
Yeah.
What are my goals really? And once you can start talking to enough people and having conversations which can give you some clarity around your goals, then you can start thinking about, who are the people that can help me achieve those goals? So, easy example, of course, is if I wanted to run a marathon, I would want to hang around with people who either want to do the same thing or have done
it, yeah.
So that now I'm surrounded by a group of people. Instead of being left to my own devices to figure out what I do over the next 18 weeks to prepare for this race, I start being surrounded by people who don't think it's a lunacy, first of all, to want to run 26 miles to begin with. They all get it. They're all committed to the goal. We're going to encourage each other. I can get training tips from those folks, and we can exchange ideas, things that are working for us and not. And we can say to one another, hey, did you get your run in today? You were due to have an 8-mile run today. How'd that go?
How'd it go?
So I think once we're clear about what our goals are, then we can start looking at, who are the people that we can surround ourselves with that can make that possible. One of the interesting things, we're all familiar with the fact that, in fact, in the U.S., about 45% of people tend to undertake a New Year's resolution at the beginning of the year. And with all the commitment and all the excitement, yes, I'm going to do this. By mid-February, 80% of those people have failed
every year
at their New Year's resolution. And in large part, it has to do with the fact that we're really good at setting goals oftentimes, but we're not as good as identifying and listening to people that can help us achieve those goals.
Well put. So I so appreciate in the book, Leo, that you talk about vulnerability. Why is this necessary for a successful peer group experience?
We can't talk about half an issue. We can't talk about the fact that, we can't talk about the head part of an issue when you're not willing to talk about the fact that you're afraid or that you're uncertain or that, sometimes the real things that can block us from moving forward and acting oftentimes. And what's really fascinating about this is that because we have so few places in our life where we're not trying to put our best foot forward and our best face forward, right? That to be in a group of people where you can actually feel safe to just go, just be able to
exhale,
yes, and talk about an issue in a very complete way. It's really liberating. And what's fascinating is oftentimes when people get together in groups, they think, how many years does it take for people to do that? And quite frankly, in many cases, it takes place really fast because people are so hungry for that environment that once they realize that the other people in the room are there for the same thing, they share in a way that's really extraordinary. And what you find is, again, you get to the heart of what's going on in most cases. Otherwise, you're just going to have surface conversations. If you're not really willing to dive into what's going on and be able to actually get questions from people who will ask you, they're not going to let you get away with the surface answer. They want to dig deep. They want to know what's happening, what's behind the way you're feeling, what's behind your reluctance to do whatever it is that is being talked about. And these are conversations oftentimes that you can't have with your employees, and you can't have with your board of directors. So this is where this group is extremely powerful and extremely valuable for leaders.
So perhaps even that safe space to talk about failures and what's not going well. And it really indicates that leaders are continually a work in progress.
Absolutely. Failures, fears, uncertainties, all the kinds of things that you may not want to bring to your staff meeting.
Right.
But at the same time, we're all human. We all have these things going on. And, again, we talk about, bringing your best face forward, your best foot forward, only to find out that, as much as we all want to say, everything's great and this is going on and this is all wonderful.
Not always.
We all have things going on in the background that that we don't share often enough.
So it's good to be able to get real. Leo, it's clear that the individual growth is an advantage of peer groups, but you also write beautifully in the book about how it can accelerate business growth as well. Can you give us an example?
Sure. One of the stories that I found very powerful, of course, is Jay Steinfeld's story. Jay Steinfeld is a story that is really both personally and professionally challenging. I mean, he and his wife had started a business together. It was kind of a mom and pop drapery store. His wife had cancer. She died. He was feeling very, very alone. I mean, it was a very difficult time for him. He had joined a group, and he had that group to help him kind of process that situation with. Going through what next steps were going to be for him in his life and all that. And at the same time, he had this business that he had actually just converted it from this mom and pop shop to like a blinds.com is what it ended up being. Blinds.com went on to be extremely successful. It was worth probably close to $150 million or somewhere in that ballpark before it was purchased by Home Depot back in 2014. So it's an interesting story because, again, he was dealing with real deep personal struggles, and at the same time, he was also trying to run a business where, as people often do when they are new CEOs, where he's trying to be the chief everything officer instead of knowing what being a chief executive officer is really all about.
Whatever it takes.
So on both fronts, and with companies, we all think that, okay, I'm the leader, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to work today and I'm going to fix everybody else and make sure everyone's good. And the reality is that we have to start with ourselves first.
Mm-hmm.
Our any kind of professional growth, organizational growth, anything like that, begins with real personal growth, and that's what we talk about in the book.
Beautifully put. So I want to talk about chapter 10, which is titled The 2020 Vision Advantage. Would you explain that?
Sure. One of the ways to think about it is if I were living in Florida and I never got out of my house, I would have a very difficult time if I were just going to look out the window and hope that I could prepare properly for a hurricane. So when you are in a group and you actually get outside of your company and get outside of your industry and start having a view of the broader landscape that can help you see what's coming, that's where these groups can be very, very powerful. It's so essential that we know that there are things in the economy. Something happens here, 3 months later, we know it triggers something else, which then triggers something else. If we're not watching that landscape and seeing these things falling into place, we're going to have a very difficult time trying to anticipate what could be upcoming challenges for our own businesses. So the more that we can step outside of our company and our industry, engage with people where we can all take a moment and look at the broader landscape and see what's going on, the better we're going to be able to prepare. Back in 2008, with the financial crisis, most of the CEOs of companies that I talked to who survived and even thrived during that crisis basically said that it wasn't that they were a better run company than any of their competitors, some of whom may have gone out of business, but they were better prepared. And that's what makes the big difference, and that's why groups can be really, really powerful in helping one another prepare for what's ahead.
So, Leo, as we wrap up, I'm sure there are many, many success stories, and I know you illustrate several in the book from those who are benefiting from these peer groups. But can you share one that you found particularly compelling?
There's one actually that isn't even from the book, but
Okay.
I tell it quite a bit. It's from a woman, Carol Temetsko, who runs a company called Litron Laboratories up in upstate New York, Rochester. And, her story was one where she started the company with her husband. It was actually really her husband's dream. They had the company for about 10 years, and he died unexpectedly. And she was left now with, all right, what do I do? And of course, she saw that not only were the employees and all so distraught, but she knew that there was something, in terms of the mission and her personal commitment to human health, where she kept the company going forward. Fast forward a few years after that, and someone suggested that she joined a group because at the end of the day, she was more of a scientist than she really was a business person. So once she surrounded herself with business people, number one, that was a big help. But secondly, one of the things that was really evident in her world was that in this world of science, it was pitting one scientist against one another. It's who gets to the top of the mountain first. And what was interesting was she was around a group of CEOs that basically said, what if you collaborated with some of these people? What if couldn't you get farther, faster, if that were possible? And so today, her company that used to rely almost exclusively on government grants, today serves laboratories in 37 countries.
Wow.
Around the world due to a model of collaboration that was just so extraordinary and just allowed everything in the company to blossom after that. So, very interesting to get that perspective and see the difference between this competition that we sometimes get so caught up in and what it can mean when we work together and we collaborate. And I think it serves as a perfect metaphor for why groups like this can be so powerful.
Great story. Thank you for sharing that. Leo Bottary, your book is The Power of Peers, How the Company You Keep Drives Leadership, Growth, and Success. So tell us how we can buy the book and connect with you online.
Sure. You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, iBooks if you choose to do that. It's available everywhere in that regard. It is in hardcover, ebook, or Kindle version, and certainly there's an audiobook available as well. And I would really encourage you to have a look. Again, it focuses a lot on CEOs and small business owners and we did that for a reason. But the reality is that there isn't any one of us that can't benefit from a good peer group. So.
Wonderful. Leo, thank you so much. What a joy to have you on the show. And I have to say, I am very happy that the book is also available in audiobook, because so many busy professionals don't have the time to sit down and read, but they do have time to listen. So well done.
Thank you so much. And it was such a pleasure being on your show today. And thanks for all the wonderful questions, and really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, Leo, and be well.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in to Your Working Life, where my goal is to help you design your career destiny so it doesn't happen by default. Career and life satisfaction is possible, and it's time to embrace what you love doing so you can do more of it. My show is now available on iTunes, YouTube, Podbean, and Stitcher. Leave a comment, as I always appreciate hearing from my listeners. I'm Caroline Dowd-Higgins. Take good care.